That was very interesting, and I want to commend the CSIR for this program. I think it's very necessary, and the CSIR is able to look at matters from various perspectives, not just from the academic perspective, but from the practical perspective as well. So it's very exciting. I think that the CSIR is involved in this and has done this kind of analysis. Kurt also asks, from the energy mix graph, is nuclear power included, and what is the future forecast for introducing new NNPs?
So the graph that was included is the graph for the IRP 2019. Sorry, can you still hear me?
Oh, you were accidentally muted.
Yeah, so the graph that was included in our analysis for the direct and indirect jobs that would be gained and lost for from the IRP 2019 did include nuclear. If you remember, the table it didn't happen, but there was supposed to have been a procurement of 1,860 odd megawatts of nuclear in 2024. But as I mentioned in the presentation, that the IRP has not been implemented as was planned. As to the future forecast for the inclusion of new nuclear, I think we will all have to wait to see what comes out of what will be promulgated by the DMRE following the conclusion of the public consultation process on the revised IRP.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Tshwanelo. Nozipo says, we hear a lot about the need for partnerships between TVET, Universities of Technology, and the firms on skills development. Did your research find anything to suggest that the current CETA, TVET, and industry arrangements are not working?
So the analysis that we would have done on the TVETs and CETAs was related just to green hydrogen. And like I mentioned in the presentation, the purpose of the analysis was to, one, understand what kind of qualifications are required for the different occupations. Let me just try and bring up a slide so I can show you. All right, so like I mentioned, the purpose of the analysis was to identify what are the occupations that are required for the green hydrogen value chain. And we'd identified 138 occupations, and 38 of those would be technicians and tradespersons, what we would typically get out of the TVET college ecosystem, and then looked at in these programs that are currently being offered here. I think it's 19 NCV programs, 19 NATED, and I think 27 that we'd identified of occupational qualifications that exist and can be augmented. 7 and 3 that exist here, mainly related to your engineering qualifications that exist and can be augmented. So it wasn't a critique on whether they are working or not. It was an analysis of what qualifications do we have that we can use as a base to augment with these 185 capabilities. So these are capabilities that we've identified across the different segments of the value chain, whether you're talking production, storage, transport, end-use applications, and some cross-cutting functions that you may need to augment what's currently being offered in these qualifications, what's currently being offered in these university programs, and then what's currently being offered or offered as on-job training for these existing occupations. So yeah, the analysis wasn't a critique on the functionality of the TVETs. We went as far as identifying that, of course, like I mentioned, they will have the same challenge that international organizations are currently experiencing in terms of the capacity that is available from a human resource perspective and even infrastructure to then be able to do that teaching. But that's not a TVET college unique challenge. In South Africa, we do have a few universities, but also mainly focusing on postgraduate research. And so, yeah, the analysis would have been limited to that point only.
I want to ask you, what is the next step now that this report has been done? By the way, is it on the web?
I can share a link with you, but it is on the LMI website. The next step is to, I guess, we've shared it, we've disseminated it, is for industry to see if they are now starting to develop green hydrogen projects. If they're working on upskilling and reskilling programs, they can consider some of the capabilities we've recommended for the different occupations. Some of the international partners have reached out to us to try and identify sort of what you would call low-hanging fruits for partnership or collaboration to assist in the development of things like CPD programs where they already have such programs in their institutions that we can maybe borrow from. But it's really for the use of stakeholders in the industry, whether it's your universities, your TVET colleges, and your CETAs. Chieta has indicated that they were looking at the report. They are introducing some green hydrogen related occupational, or considering introducing some green hydrogen related occupational qualifications, and would hopefully be consulting some of the pages of the report to see if there's capabilities that they would consider for the programs.
Okay, fantastic. So yes, if you could share the link with us, we can put it on our website as well on the event page, and people can visit it there. Thank you very much. Ms. Rakaibe, is that correct? Am I saying your name correctly?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. That was extremely interesting. Okay. Ashley, can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much for an amazing presentation. I just have one question, or maybe two questions, I don't know. So my question is, what lesson can we learn from the past energy transition? Like from the past, we transitioned from wood to coal, right? What can we learn from that, and how can we apply them to the current transition to renewable?
I think the PCC will probably add a little bit more meat to my response. But I think that the transition is something that we need to consider, not only the technical elements of what technologies must we go with, because it's going to contribute to the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, nor should there be a prioritization of those greenhouse gas emissions, which is the environmental considerations. But it needs to be balanced with considering the economic impacts of those decisions, as well as the social outcomes that emanate from those decisions. So it's a balancing act, I think, between technical, environmental, economic, and social, because at the end of the day, there isn't any that's more important than the other. Because ultimately the transition has an impact. If you're prioritizing the technical aspects only, you risk leaving people behind. And if you prioritize just the social or economic aspects, there is an impact on the economy. So it's a balancing act, I would say, between those four elements.
Right, right. Okay, thank you for that answer, and thanks for the question, Ashley. Simpiwe Mini says there's a misplaced confidence on South African industry, and I think this is misplaced confidence because for the last 30 years we have no evidence to make a claim that industry is making any contribution. What CSIR to be so confident about the sector? Tshwanelo, would you like to answer that? Why is CSIR confident about working with industry?
Working with industry to solve problems, I'm not understanding, but I'm going to assume that this again links to the green hydrogen project because it's the emerging industry. I think there's a role to play for everyone, but there's certainly, and that would include government, that would include the private sector, it would include research institutions like us, where in this instance, we provide information that can help everyone to plan. The extent to which that's utilized is dependent on a lot of factors. But in the area of skills, I don't think that industry is averse to being empowered with information that can help them to prepare their future skills force, or to be able to, in the example of a company like Sasol, who is making investments migrating to green hydrogen and is currently in the gray hydrogen value chain, to be empowered with information on how you're able to retrain and reskill those individuals to be able to migrate. I don't see that as something that private sector would be averse to. For other industries and other contributions, perhaps, the jury is out on that. But from a skills related perspective, I think the more we know, the more we can do. As I mentioned in the PV and the onshore wind value chain, we stop at identifying the occupations that are required, but do we know what that specific project manager needs to be doing? That's the next level. And so the more information you, as whether you are in the private sector, you're in academia, you have, the better you are able to prepare the future or current skills workforce that is wanting to migrate to different value chains.
Right. I think there's some economic imperatives that are actually driving industry towards renewables. What do you think?
No, definitely, and we've seen with the CBAM that's come out, it's becoming uncompetitive for them to not go on that journey, and it's uncompetitive for us as a country as well. So they are also being incentivized in other ways, which is why I'm saying there's a role for everybody to play. There's a role for research organizations to play. There's a role for government to play. In ensuring that, yes, industry comes to the party in the way that the country needs them to.
Right. Yes. And in the process, creating jobs, which we sorely need. Simpiwe Mini, would you like to speak?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the session. It's quite inspiring, and it's interesting and quite encouraging to hear CSIR coming on board, because it is generally expected that CSIR will provide scientific leadership especially in the space of energy. And I want just to reiterate my point that I am skeptical of the emphasis on industry in general, generalizing so much that we are not specific as to what industrial sector are we looking at to make a contribution. Because honestly speaking, I believe industry is very reluctant and is looking at its own, private capital accumulation opportunities than to make a general contribution for the sustainability and sustainable development of the country. So personally, I would encourage CSIR to be more specific and more precise, not just to generalize and talk general and broad terms about industry. What industrial sector are we referring to? So that there is a clear commitment, a clear synergies being established, a clear programmatic activities driven by combination of the, by the whole coalescence of partners that are interesting. To mention industry broadly speaking, honestly, I don't think it's helpful. For the last 30 years, I want to repeat, industry has not come on board. And the only thing that we have seen, industry is just being critical of the large populace of the country without really making any meaningful contribution. Industry is complaining about lack of skills, lack of proper training, but we hardly see them making any contribution on that space to enhance the skills development in this country. So once I really commend CSR for this, but my point is can they be more precise and more specific, not just in general terms? We do not have the luxury of time. The situation is very disparate and is very urgent. If we are really going to make any transition from fuel-based energies to renewables, there must be a dedicated, focused approach with clear accountability, with clear milestones. Otherwise, we will keep on speculating and making these broad general terms. Thank you, Chair. This is a wonderful session and I am inspired. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simpiwe. Tshwanelo, would you like to respond to that, or shall we leave it there?
No, I think his point is well taken. I think from his comment, for there to be specific targets or communication of exactly what's expected from which industrial players, I think government has a really important role to play in that, and we saw it on the REAP program. Whether it's successful or not, Simpiwe can give his observations, but where there are firm economic development criteria that are required in order for projects to be considered for participation in these programs, because there is an understanding there's a need to create jobs, there's a need to empower the communities that host these projects, and there's a need to create value through local procurement of services and products that construct these projects. But I definitely think that, yes, we all have a role to play, but in this instance, I would think the specific targets that then get placed on private sector largely do sit in the ambit of government. Whether we're talking renewables or for these sectors that are going to start emerging.
Yes, right. Very interesting. It's we're having a number of speakers who are talking from the private sector perspective today. So we will catch up on that point. We'll revisit it. Thank you very much, and Tshwanelo, for your presentation and for your interaction with the audience.